Just quickly, a little bit about my background. I'm an undergraduate in economics. I did my master's at Cornell. Revenue management is the correct balance between hospitality and economics. So that's what kind of got me interested. Worked with a family company, was born and brought up in a family restaurant chain, which we divested in 2006. So started life very much in understanding revenue, profitability, how to make money. Went on to work with Conrad. I think Detlev actually mentioned, Professor Remy actually mentioned one of my mentors, Mr. Graffa. Learned a lot about revenue management and how to get things started. That was years ago, started my own consultancy, currently teaching as well as an adjunct faculty at SITs in the space of revenue and digital marketing. I also, side by side, run a preschool chain. We have 27 schools globally in US, UK, India, and China. So that runs side. One thing which I do want to tell you is that revenue management crosses industries. It's a way of thinking, it's a way of life. And I apologize as I walk around, my back is towards some of you, but it is really how you think through things. You know, where normally the people in the room that ask the most obvious questions, can you make more money from that? Fundamentally, that's what you're trying to do at the end of the day. When I started off in revenue management in Conrad, and you'll notice the white hair, this was 2002. I'm not kidding, we were talking about total revenue management back then. How do you make more money? Unfortunately, we have not moved much further. We know a lot more about what we have to do. It's just that things have not changed too much. So let's start with a little bit of a sit and stand. How many of you are currently doing some form of rooms revenue in your hotels? Oh, wow, so not even everybody doing rooms. Okay, not bad. How many are doing some form of F&B revenue management? Oh, half and half, okay. Not bad, actually, better than I expected. How many of you are doing anything with your meeting spaces? Okay, going down further. And how many with your spas? Okay. And how many are you doing revenue management with any other sort of revenue that comes out of your hotel? Wow, okay, some around. So at the end of the day, when you think about revenue management, you need to take a step back. You have a space, correct? Your aim is to make the most profit out of that space. That's how you need to start thinking of it. So it's not just about maximizing the revenue from your restaurant space. Is that restaurant space even needed? Right? Do you even need it there? Is it more profitable to turn it into rooms? Is it more profitable to turn it into banqueting space? Is it more profitable to lease it out and earn a rental on it? These are all questions that you need to start thinking of when you're looking at that. Yeah? But I will not go into that detail today. I will keep it a little bit simpler, and I will talk a little bit about total revenue forecasting. So if I can trouble all of you to get on to Mentimeter. Give me a second. The code comes up here as well. Can you scan that, or is it too small? Sorry.
Perhaps read out the figure and the number.
Without glasses, not so easy. 33780109. Yep, 33780109. Okay, thank you. Total revenue forecast, profitability, money, collaboration, total. Only 8 of you online currently. Demand. Oh, that's getting a lot. Guessing game. Hopefully that won't be it any longer. Loyalty, profit. Prediction with accuracy, I like that one. Revenue optimization, opportunity, leadership, repeater. Interesting. Repeater, I didn't quite understand. That's 26 people saying a lot. I think there's more than 26 here. But yes, TRF fundamentally is the forecasting in terms of total revenue management. Let's go on to the next question. So, I think total revenue forecasting, we all know it, but why is it important? Why should we even care about it? Evidently, no one cares about it. No, but seriously, why should we even care about it? Why is it even important? Owner's happiness, future costs, healthy balance sheet, okay. Arrive at best revenue, loyalty, get the full picture, anticipation, manage shareholder value, definitely. Cost optimization, direct marketing, CRM, EBITDA, very important terms. Profit, yes, the biggest. Anyone else joining? Okay. So just one more I want to add in here. When you're doing total revenue forecasting, you're also helping, and this is, of course, profit is the most important reason, understanding the totality that your space can make, definitely the most important. But you're also helping your other operational demands forecast how their staffing is done. That does lead down back to profit, right? So if I remember correctly, I remember once the housekeeping head, this is back when I was doing revenue management at Conrad, came to me and she said, what is your forecast looking for June? Because I need to give my housekeepers leave. So I said, okay, well, that makes sense. You know, housekeepers, number of rooms makes sense. Then the F&B guy came and asked me the question, as did the security. And I suddenly realized that it was not just the rooms, it was also each and every guest that was coming in, and not just understanding number of people. And we'll talk about a little bit about that today. What market segments are staying in your hotel, right? Who's staying there? It's not just total number of rooms that matters. If you have 100 rooms, are all 100 going to go down for breakfast? Depends. It depends on the market segments that are staying in-house. It depends on the groups that you have. It depends on what sort of corporate business. Now, the good and bad news is this data exists for us today. We have this data, right? This data exists for us. It's just that we do not have, it's not neatly put together. And I think one of our colleagues earlier today kind of got to that point. We have the data, we're just not tracking it. So, for example, if you look at some of your guest history data, right? And I'm just talking basic room revenue here. And you try to find out which is your most stayed market segment, or sorry, most stayed nationality, my apologies. Most stayed nationality, chances it's the first country on the list. I was always surprised how Conrad had so many guests coming in from Afghanistan. You know, like, but it was your first name, so if they didn't know the nationality, they needed to answer the question because it's mandatory, so it's the first name on the list. We have access, so when we're getting into TRF, when we're getting into TRM, it's not just the rooms data, it's the same data in F&B, and we kind of also came to that point a little while ago. For example, you have an in-house guest, right? They go dine at the restaurant. They have a big lunch, invite 20 people. The bill is paid by their corporate office in that city. That bill is charged on a credit card. Chances are your F&B department has kind of lodged that as a Visa payment or a MasterCard payment. So you do not know that that revenue was actually linked to the room. Those linkages are important. So while we talk about systems that exist, till we don't get our processes into place internally, until we don't clean our data, garbage in, garbage out. Okay, moving on. Let's look at the next question. What are some of the revenue sources for a hotel? I used the word ancillary a little while ago, and then I think both Professor Remy and Anders had sort of said ancillary is the non-smaller. So I said, before we get into a discussion on what ancillary is, let's just call it revenue. So what are the revenue sources for a hotel? Parking, golf, spa, laundry, rooms, F&B, banquets, breakfast, accommodation, of course. I'm assuming there's casino, experience activities, room add-ons, laundry, golf. No, exactly. No, sorry, let's see if we get any more. Now, seaplane. Wow, very specific hotel. Okay, now one interesting thing that if you were listening in yesterday is people who are traveling today, majority of them are looking at experiences. There's a lot of leisure travel, right? Which is mixing business and leisure. Your opportunity today to sell not just the rooms, but the total revenue is a lot larger than existed some time ago, right? People are looking at experiences, people are coming out and looking at what else they can do, whether they can go to a spa, and these are things that you can add on. I think one of the speakers yesterday also came towards it. Rather than building packages and then cluttering your pricing, if you can have dynamic packages with add-ons, that's a way better way of doing it, that people have the choice to choose. All little things that you can put into play as you're doing your setups on the internet or your various systems to attract guests to come in, right? So I'm not saying don't go back today and, from a hotel's perspective, come up with a ton of packages with rooms revenue and you run into 5 pages of rate codes. Please do not do that. Not at all a good suggestion. Like Professor Remy mentioned, you will confuse your guests. Completely confuse them. What you want to do is do dynamic pricing, but before you do that, understand your market, understand who's coming in here. Go talk to the guests, right? Go understand what the guests are. And information today exists. Go look at who's liking your posts on social media. You can like and see and understand what that customer is, what that sort of like is. Don't be creepy, and when you see them have their birthday come up, say, birthday package spa, but honestly, technically, it's a good selling strategy, but it is a little into the data situation. But understand who's coming in. What's very interesting, and I learned this from Mr. Graffer, was that as a revenue person, it's important to be at the front desk, to see your guest, right? To understand who the person is, what they like, what they don't like, how they react. So we then started strategies like if the guest is coming in late at night and they're looking tired, please don't try at that point to upsell them to a room. You will annoy them. And that is the only thing that they will remember is I was tired, I want to get to my room. That's not the chance to make revenue. You will lose that guest. And we'll touch upon something called customer lifetime value as well and talk about that. So let's look at some of our total revenue metrics. So if you're calculating something, if you're going to be looking at forecasting, you need to know what to track. Otherwise, you're sort of lost, right? One, of course, is TRF par, which is looking at the total revenue and dividing it by the number of available rooms, right? TRF par. The another one is TREV PSF, looking at your total revenue per square foot of the property. Now comes in, if you have balconies, do you include that? Is that wasted space? Is that not? Many questions, but these are all food for thought when you're doing your calculations. Then is another interesting one called room rate multiplier, which shows the amount of spend on your ancillary revenues. And when ancillary here, I'm defining it as non-rooms revenue, yeah? As compared to your rooms. So for every $1 spent, another 36 cents is spent on other stuff. This is something actually when we were doing corporate negotiations, we would track this and try to see based on what their room rate multiplier was, accordingly also base their corporate rates. So it's another great one, very easy to calculate. Of course, one major issue here is if your food and beverage department and your meeting and sales department is not tracking the revenue to the rate code, it'll get lost. So just for you to know that it exists, but you need to also make sure the data is clean. And then of course, GOP/PESF, which is your gross operating profit per square foot. Actually, honestly, one of my favorites, because when you're going across departments, when you're looking at total revenue, your costs are different. It's not a standardized cost. So it's what is your gross operating profit per square foot. That's where your shareholder value comes into play. So some of the challenges that exist for total revenue forecasting today: appropriate platforms or systems. There are many systems and platforms out there today that can do something in terms of total revenue forecasting. Honestly, I've looked around, I've not found one that I would say, okay, hand it over, I'm done, I retire. Not there yet. But there are enough systems that can help you support your decision making. But what stays in our hands today is our data integrity. That little gigo in the corner, garbage in, garbage out, that's our challenge today. We can have the best systems, but if we do not have proper data integrity, if we do not have proper data, we're going to be stuck having rubbish coming out at us, right? Of course, trained RM staff, this is improving, but what is happening? You have your revenue manager normally looking at the room side. Very few organizations have your revenue manager looking at food and beverage, looking at banqueting, looking at spa. Most of those are run by the spa operations manager. And honestly, their skill set is completely different. They're not hired to do revenue management. Their skill set is completely different. So trained staff is, of course, an important one. Tracking of guest flow, tracking of guest spending, not there yet. Data exists. Don't get me wrong, it is there. It is there if you look in the system and you really dive deep into it, but it is not there yet. These are some of the things that you could put into place right now, just asking questions and seeing if you're tracking properly. Lack of metrics, there are many, there are few, there are no industry standards, you may come up with your own, and then you have no one to compare it to. So there is no certain sort of agreement on metrics. Where to start? Do you start with your function space? Do you start with F&B? Do you start with spa? I mean, I bring up spa because there are hotels like Banyan Tree where spa is huge. In some properties, it's not that huge. Some properties even don't have them. Maybe your seaplane business. I saw one of you come up with seaplane as another non-rooms revenue source. Maybe your seaplane business is huge. Start there. But really start, where do you start? I mean, do you go into all of them? But what is really interesting is when long-term, we need to look at your profitable guest. You need to look at the customer lifetime value versus the cost of customer acquisition, right? The cost of customer acquisition means how much does it cost to acquire that customer? What channels do you need to reach out to? Is it all online? Is it spent on SEO? Is it marketing? Is it through your networks in terms of travel agents? Is it wholesaler commissions? What is the cost of acquiring that customer? And what is the lifetime value that person is going to give you? Is he just going to spend on rooms, he or she? Is he going to, kind of come and celebrate their 50th anniversary, their birthday, their son's birthdays? All of this comes into play. And this again changes by market segment. Your local guests may have a different behavior to your guests coming from overseas. So again, these are questions for you to look at and ask. So currently, I think both Professor Remy and Anders touched about this, is we have more of a siloed method, right? You have your rooms doing their rooms forecast. Most of you, I think from what I understood, are doing that. Many of you are doing your F&B forecast. I don't know if you're dividing your forecast between in-house and local guests. I don't know if you're actually tracking that or not sure yet. Many of you are doing your function space forecast. Are you dividing between in-house and local guests? I don't know. I don't know how exactly that is being done. And many of you are doing your spa forecast, which is in-house, again, your local guests or your packages. But what exists with all these, while many of you will most probably be doing these are all siloed. They're not communicating with each other. There's no synergy among systems. You're getting one PDF report out of somewhere, you're getting an Excel sheet out of a third place, and third one from Spark comes as a nice typed out table in an email. And then as a revenue person, you're sitting there saying, oh my God, firstly, how do I combine all this data? But you do have some of the information. Secondly, who owns the data? Who's checking on the data? Who's making sure it's accurate? Because chances are each of your departments are responsible for it. And thirdly, how are you syncing the data, right? We spoke about the example of where an F&B guest may go and spend a room guest may go and spend in the hotel, give me a second. A room guest may go and spend in a restaurant. This happens often. You have an Amex promo running. They're not going to charge it back to their room. They're going to use their Amex card. F&B will not go in and bother to put in that this is a guest staying in room 1501. It will just be Amex promo, and you will not understand what actually brought them in. Amex is something that they may have used to make the payment, but that's not got them in, right? So when you're looking at forecasting non-rooms revenue for in-house guests, yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to forecast non-rooms revenue for in-house guests because that's an important part of total revenue management or total revenue forecasting. That's not being done very well because you have different systems running in silos. The first thing you need to understand is the behavior of different market segments. And by behavior, we're looking at their booking paces, we're looking at the systems they use to book, what sort of rate codes they normally book, all of that, the different market segments, your groups versus your transient, your leisure versus your business, right? Whether it's a family coming, is it a long stay guest? Their behavior changes, what sort of rate codes they book, what sort of other sorts of revenue that they consume in the hotel as well change, right? If you're a guest who's staying for 14 nights, chances are you will do some laundry, you may eat or may not eat in the restaurant a few times. You may or may not use some form of business center as well. So all of these things come into consideration. But then this could also change by month, by day of week, right? Or by special events. Special events, I'm talking about not just holiday periods, but also conventions or any high demand events that are happening in your city. But what's interesting is, and COVID took away that sort of feeling we had of comfort of same week last year. Yeah, same week last year don't work anymore, right? Sometimes just looking at last week. So as a revenue person now, you're supposed to look and understand, is my data trending as per how it was 3 years ago? Am I doing similar? Can I just say 3 years ago plus 5%, 3 years ago minus 5%? Is that falling through? Should I look at just last week's data and understand that and use that to forecast future? Should I look at data from 3 months ago, right? Will June this year be similar to December that year? So when you're doing forecasting, please don't only forecast for the future. Please also go back and check how accurate your forecasts were, right? And what you base them off. Forecasting accuracy is really important because especially in a time in the world which is changing, where we're not even sure what's happening this week, next week, 2 weeks from now, is to look at your forecasting accuracy and make sure that you're on track there. Now, if you look at your F&B restaurant forecast, obviously what you're trying to do from your in-house guests is try to understand how many covers you're going to get, right? Now, if you don't track your data in your systems properly, that's not going to be the first place for you to see where it is, right? So what I would suggest is something twofold here. What you would need to do is firstly go and see how accurately, so actually physically go into your restaurant and see, are they tracking your room guest data correctly? That's one. Secondly, is if they are not, then try to get an estimate and get them to start that process of tracking data correctly, because till you don't get that data correctly done, it's going to be extremely hard for you to get an in-house guest cover forecast, because you can't just base it on gut. You can't say 100 tomorrow. Yeah, I'm convinced it's going to be 100 tomorrow, and it is 100 tomorrow. And then obviously, Average check, different question, because different market segments will have different check sizes. Now, luckily, when we're talking about breakfast, and I gave myself an easy example, you most probably have a buffet, right? So it's an easy average check. But when you talk about lunch and dinner, it's different market segments. And once you talk about using space, which is where you do want to go to, it's not just to know the numbers, it's to use that space efficiently. So, should you be turning away a corporate in-house guest for somebody who's coming in from a city for a meeting? Because chances are they will spend higher. But till you do not know that data, it's going to be extremely hard to tell whether you should turn them away. Right now, even in this industry, we're at a point where we are able to do some form of tracking, but we're not at the point where we can for sure, if someone says, lay your life on this, and do you take guest A or guest B? I ain't going to do that. Because you're not at that point where you can say for surety that the data that exists in your system is valid enough to do that. Similarly, when your function and meeting space comes in, what are your space requirements? Are you getting more guests from your city who are just regular meeting clients? Are you getting more guests from people who are booking your rooms? Are you getting more guests from general functions? As well as, obviously, the average amount they're spending. Spa, number of treatments, who's booking, when are they booking, why are they booking? And then, of course, your minibar, your laundry, movies, business center, parking, etc., etc., etc. A good idea is to get an average per room. Now, most of these, luckily, as far as minibar goes, as far as your movies go, easy. Business center, gifts, parking, not always linked to the room. So the first thing is to link that data back so that you're able to track it. And again, understanding this by your market segments, by your days of week, by your months of year, each day your behavior changes. For example, if I'm a business guest and for whatever reason I'm supposed to stay over the weekend, my behavior on a Friday night and Saturday night may be very different from how I behave Monday to Thursday. Because my meetings are over, I have a little bit of time, I can relax. Chances are Saturday night I will be out for dinner, I will not be in-house. Chances are Monday to Thursday I will be ordering room service unless I have another event. But it's when you understand your guests and you track them that you can make more data out of this. Okay, I'm going to give you a little activity and I'm going to trouble you to work into groups of 3 or 4. So maybe say hello to the people sitting next to you. And you have a 200-room hotel, and you know what your forecast of rooms sold by market segment is. You're aware of your room rate multiplier, so you know how much more people are spending. Yeah, we're talking about the perfect situation. How would you calculate your total revenue forecast? Yeah, so maybe spend 4 or 5 minutes and tell me how would you calculate your total revenue forecast. You have all this information. You have the most amazing revenue person or data person who exists at your property who's tracking data correctly. Very important. So what would you do? One, 2 eyes on me. Okay, doesn't work at this age, right? So in the interest of going for lunch, I think I'll keep the discussion a little short, but it's good to see a little chatter around the room. So, guys, anyone with any, like what would you do? This group here was chatting. You're standing right next to my line, which I've been told not to cross now, so.
I've been speaking a lot today. I've done my quota.
You've done your quota? Okay, so why don't one of you say something?
So I was actually sharing with them.
Oops, sorry, do we have a mic? Do we have a mic somewhere? Ah, thank you. Thank you. Come.
Okay,
Sorry.
hi. My name
Oh,
is
lovely.
Kim.
Thank
Yes.
you. Hi.
Okay. Actually, I come from a finance background.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. So when we talk about forecasting, a lot of things are done by historical data, right?
Yes.
And then we actually calculate backwards. So say, for example, we take December. December, you have your data for your different market segments. You definitely have like a percentage of, say, wedding rooms or your leisure travelers or whatever, right? Based on your market segment, you can actually have also a breakdown of what we call percentage revenue out of your total revenue. So, for example, if I have a total revenue of $1,000, right? For December, maybe we have 30% contribution from meeting space usage.
Okay.
Okay, 50% from rooms, and then maybe another 10% from your spa usage, and this is how we break down and calculate back up. I mean, assuming that, the patterns are almost the same
Almost the
every
same,
year,
yes.
right? Yeah, so this is how I think we will calculate our total revenue forecast.
Perfect. No, so that's actually, thank you. That's a really good way of doing it for budget process, right? You get the big numbers. But what is happening in the world today, your patterns are changing. Your guests are changing, their behavior is changing, their booking styles are changing. Their booking paces are changing. People who may have booked 2 months in advance may be booking 7 days in advance now. So even if you go back into the systems and say, normally 15 days out I get this guest, they're not there anymore. They may be coming, but 7 days later. So that's really good, and I can understand because it's coming from a finance background person. That's really good from a budgeting perspective. You get the broad numbers. But how do you get these forecasts to impact your pricing? You need to get into the bits of data. Thank you. Anybody else? Anyone else? There was a lot of chatter a few minutes ago. No one else wants to share their views?
Look, the views.
Yeah, thank you.
The views we had around here was that the math itself is not the hard part.
Exactly.
Not at all. It's just about, collecting the data that you need it. Now, you said that in this example, we've got the most amazing collector of data and everything. That's not a problem, but we can't get beyond that point because that is the problem. 1, collecting the data. 2, believing it's accurate. 3, consistently collecting that data.
Yes.
Because I've seen many efforts to start collecting it for a week or 2, and then suddenly, oh, that person was sick, and then suddenly you
it's
don't have
gone.
that data anymore. And unless you deploy real resources against it, it falls short. The math itself is not the hard part. That's the easiest thing in the world.
That's the easiest thing, yes. No, thank you. And I think you actually raised a really good point because honestly, if you want to start total revenue management and forecasting at your hotels, don't currently worry about the systems. Get your data right. Get that process started. Make sure that you're investing in the people who are collecting that data. And it's actually not hard. It's multiplication, it's averages. But it's actually just looking and making sure you're tracking it correctly. And that's something you can go back into your properties and do tomorrow. Yeah, you don't need the best system. So you don't need to go, and I'm sorry if there's anyone from the other room here. You don't need the best systems today. You need them, right? But in order to make use of the systems, garbage in, garbage out. So honestly, the next thing, and then also, I think it's creating the culture around it. Who's responsible for that data? Whose job is it to collect that data? Whose job is it to check that data? Whose job is it? And even if at this point you make some simple Excel report that gets used by people, yeah, that to me is already a huge step forward. It's about getting in and using it and moving on that data. Okay. So just to end with a little bit of ways to enhance your total revenue spends at your booking stay. Yeah, this is what you could do on your website booking or other booking engines, is how do you increase your length of stay? And why do I say length of stay increase? Because probability, and again, probability, not surety, yeah, that a guest who stays longer ends up spending more on property, right? Chances are also from a cost perspective, their room may need to be cleaned a little bit less check-in, check-out, faster turnaround of rooms. So even from a profitability perspective, should work. Also, look at your dynamic add-ons. Is it breakfast? Is it airport? Is it airport transfer? But this is where data and the way we design our systems come into play. This has got nothing to do with total revenue forecasting, but want to share an example. You know a guest makes a booking for you, right? Singapore is a very unique market. We do have a lot of guests who stay with us who live in Singapore. Yeah? Your automatic emailer goes out. Dear Pallavi, look forward to welcoming you at our AAA hotel next week. Would you like an airport transfer? Okay, you know I live in Singapore. I would love to go to Changi and fly in to stay here. This is where even you start using, and this is completely unrelated to any of this, but it just suddenly came to my mind. I wanted to share with you that when you're using these systems, these are all automated emailers. Please put in. Data exists. It's how you use that data. Yeah, you know the country of residence. If you don't know the country of residence, that's fine. But if you know the country of residence, this emailer shouldn't go out. Happens a lot, right? It happens a lot when it comes out. Automatic stuff goes out. So very important when you're talking about booking, all of this is automated stuff that you're most probably sending. It's not manually done. It's not a reservation agent writing back and copying, pasting stuff. Most of the, if it is, then wow, high labor cost. But if it is, it should be all automated, being sent out by the system. But please make sure you put these things into play. Because what happens when the guest reads that? Okay? When you sit and read something, you get a big page of paper, something on it is inaccurate, where does your mind go? To the inaccuracy. You ignore everything else. So even if the guests would have booked something else, chances are that they will let it go because they spotted, like the only thing that's going in the head, at least in my head, is, I live in Singapore, why would I go to Changi? I live in Singapore, why would I go to Changi? Not, oh, they've also given me a special dining promotion. Happened another time with another emailer. I signed up as a loyalty program guest when I was in Dubai. And I got this amazing email that came to me and said, 30 to 50% off for all our loyalty guests at our F&B restaurants. Pallavi, lover of discounts, boom, went on. All the restaurants are in Dubai. I'm like, I live in Singapore. I visited Dubai that one time in my life. I'm not going to fly back there. Same loyalty program has hotels in Singapore. If they had transmitted that with country of residence, it would have, sort of made much more sense. Your pre-arrival, again, you can email any offers relating to dining, your spa, your airport transfer, any other ancillary revenues that you make, that you think of, right? At point of check-in, upsell, cross-sell. Yeah? You can use that opportunity to upsell and cross-sell. But this is where, as revenue people, it makes sense for you to train your teams on ground. Don't give them super strong upsell quotas that they end up annoying your guests. They need to balance that, right? Yesterday, we were talking about where technology takes over from humans. As humans, we are there to understand emotion. Yeah, we shouldn't be doing stuff on an automated basis. That's where we will make a difference, to understand the guest, to empathize with them. Because at the end of the day, if you make that connection with the guest, your customer lifetime value will go up tremendously. Of course, that's why you're doing it, right? Not just to make more friends. No, I'm kidding. And then finally, during the stay, this is another time where you can use both active and passive selling techniques, right? Your passive selling techniques could be letters in the room. It could be different display boards over the hotel that are highlighting different things. Another method that works really well is when you offer it to members of certain things, a credit card discount, this thing, a loyalty program discount, etc. It gets people to feel like they're special and part of a group, and they do want to partake in that offer, even if you offer that to many other similar loyalty programs. Yeah? So with that said, I think on total revenue forecasting, and thank you, I think you summarized that very well. The numbers, the metrics, and I will go back to I need to stay alive zone. The numbers and the metrics on it are there, right? It's just how we're tracking that data, who's responsible for the data. Systems will come. And I think, like they were saying earlier, is even if you're doing a siloed approach right now, that's fine. But just make sure your data is ready to sync. Because once you get that technology in, it's really, really powerful. Yeah, it's extremely powerful, but if you're not tracking your data correctly, if your teams are not entering data correctly, if you do not know who's responsible for it, how the sort of responsibilities exist, etc., it will be very hard to get anything. So, perfect. That's all I had to say about TRF. Time for lunch. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.